I'm just signing in. Oh, I'm not going to sign this role. So actually, it's probably a bit distracting, so I'll leave it off. Oh, I can see it's popping up. Here we are.
Welcome to the internet, everyone.
Welcome to the internet.
Logging on.
Live web.
Well, good eve, everyone. Welcome to the Journeyman Questers for our second week of our player roundtables. This week, I'm joined by none other than Josh, aka Rufus Suncrest. How you doing, man?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
What are you eating? What are you eating? We want dinners in the chat.
Oh, I'm having like the most English meal ever. I'm having sausage and mash, but like sweet potato and it's veggie.
Sounds great.
So it's like Morrissey English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is he still a vegetarian? I feel like he's ethical, but like
I think he's a
ethical
vegetarian.
with that, but he's not an ethical person.
I think he's a vegetarian in the same way that certain Austrian politicians were vegetarian.
Oh no! and as you can see, we're joined by Aiden, aka
Hello.
Richter Weiss.
Hello, everybody.
How are you doing,
remembered my character's surname. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I
sick.
know. Not everyone does.
No,
Yeah.
you got it. You did it
What?
in the German and everything. Yes, I am well. I am sweaty. It is hot and balmy here. I can see past the computer through an open window a train going by. I don't think they can see my sweaty form, so I'm pretty comfortable with it. Yeah. Oh, I'm sort of hearing myself, but you know what? I have a nice voice, so I don't mind that.
Yeah, how did that happen? That was weird. Is it coming through Josh's speakers? I don't know.
Oh, is that a thing? I thought it was
Potentially.
gonna not do that. Yeah, I'll put headphones on in a second.
No worries. Enjoy your dinner, man. So, Aiden, what dinner's in the chat? What you having? What you had?
Tonight I will be having. I have to choose about whether I want to have a vegan fish finger sandwich or a vegan sausage sandwich, with probably a little pasta salad on the side.
That is a fine choice.
Well, I made a huge like salad bowl full of pasta salad, and now I've got to eat all the fucking stuff. So got to try and incorporate it into whatever meals I can.
Do you get that thing where you can make the most delicious meal, and it can if you make like a gigantic portion and then you're eating it for the next week, that last portion you have, it's like, even though it's delicious, you're getting really sick of it and you really want something different.
There's a real sort of balancing point where the first day you make it, it's like, this turned out good. Then after like 2 or 3 days, all of the sort of, it's kind of mulched and percolated and all the flavors have intertwined with that gentle rot that it's doing. And that's when the real flavor country kicks in. But then about 5 days in, it's like, I want to die.
I want something different.
I
It
just
tastes
want
bland.
anything else.
Somehow it tastes bland.
All the
even if
money
it's
I
really
saved
flavorful.
by making this, I just want to spend on a Papa John's or something. It's like,
So, this evening we're going to be talking about player death. So that's our subject for this evening. Some of us have had some intimate
Died
experience
more than
with this,
others.
haven't we? Have died
Who's
more
got
than
the
others.
most qualified person in the group?
Aiden, the player character killer. Yeah, that's me. I go through them like disposable tin soldiers, and I'm happy about it. Yeah.
Just a little pre-warning. I've been a bit sick the last couple of days. I got my COVID vaccination on Tuesday, so I'm a little bit unprepared compared to last week. But Aiden's been doing a lot of thinking, so hopefully that'll carry us through the hour.
No pressure, gunky boy. All right.
I'm sure when we get the sort of creative juices flowing, so to speak, we'll go on some tangents, which is what we love.
I'm in exactly the same boat. I got mine yesterday and I'm feeling weird inside.
How's your arm?
Yeah.
Can you lift it that high, or?
Do you know what? Yesterday was bad
It
for the arm.
hurts.
Oh yeah.
That hurts a lot.
I couldn't get it much higher than that. Yeah. Also, no one screen capped Josh doing that. It was a very particular angle. We don't want that. That's not good for us.
No.
So
But yeah,
I
I've made no preparation. I'm going in raw. I'm ready to chat.
yeah, rugged and raw.
Proxness and yeah.
I can sort of try to kick it off a little bit. And I think the reason why this is such an interesting subject to discuss is because of how impactful it is to the game. Purely because of how... So you create this character and hopefully you're playing them for sometimes years, and the impact of this character dying it can be huge. You can have a very emotional response to that happening. And it's part of the beauty of the game is there's a risk rewards there. And I think it's very fulfilling to know that you've got this risk that this character could die, because you're putting yourself into these dangerous situations. It's the nature of the game, of course. And you're not mortal, although obviously you're a very powerful being, especially when you reach higher levels. It's something that I think is very attractive. It's of course in a video game, but you have that ability to be able to just to reload in most video games, and so you don't have that level of risk there.
It was interesting what you were saying regarding the sort of the higher levels, and the longer that you play, the more that you feel invested in a character, because I kind of see this as a bit of an almost inherent paradox within the idea of player death, in that in the first few levels, you've got your character, but like a lot of the time for the first like 3 levels, like for instance like with a paladin, first 3 levels you haven't even taken an oath yet. You're basically just some prick with a big old sword and some plate mail. Like you don't matter. You haven't been formed or forged. You haven't, like, you might have some backstory, you might have what we refer to as knives to look forward to in the future, but if that character should eat it, it's kind of like, oh well, that was fun, However, as you say, the longer you go, you might get like a couple of years into a character, at which point you've got like a whole parasocial relationship with them. If that character dies, like, it is on one hand very traumatic. However, the paradox comes into it where once you get to like level like 15, 16, 17, death becomes quite an assailable hurdle. It's something that you can actually, like, well, do we have any diamonds? Do we have any 1,000 gold diamonds to deal with this problem? So it is kind of a balancing act. I feel like level 10 is the real terror point, where it's like, oh, I really like this guy, but if he dies, we're fucked. Like, I can't get him back. So there is a kind of a trade-off there.
It's really before you have access to those fail-safe spells, which allow you to bring back, and not this isn't just player characters, this is characters in general. We've had experiences in our campaign where we've not only brought back characters from the game, but there's been points where we haven't been able to bring back characters because we weren't at that point powerful enough. That's something that I think Josh's character Rufus can definitely relate to. Speaking to a specific example, perhaps you want to talk a little bit about that, Josh. I know, like, we're talking about player character, but I think I want to encompass character death in this as well, because you do become quite attached to some of the NPCs in a D&D campaign as well. So it is an important thing to touch on. Yeah,
definitely. Are you referring to Spera?
Absolutely, yeah. Do you want to just fill in the potential listeners who this individual is?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. I didn't think about that. I was really like, when you suggested this topic, I was like, I don't know how in depth this is going to be, like how much we can talk about it. But already I'm like, man, yeah, it is super impactful. So what the others are referring to is, I don't know what level we were. It must have been, I don't know. I mean, it was pretty early on.
I wasn't Richter at this point, so it was a while. It was a while back.
That's something to touch on as well.
Somewhere maybe between like 5 and 10 level wise.
We were less than level 7 because that's when we started recording the podcast. But I think we were definitely above level 3, 4. So maybe like level 4 or 5, I want to say.
Yeah, really.
Right. We were pretty low level at that point.
Yeah, we had sort of just met Varian, I think, at that point. Like,
that's nuts actually thinking about that, because that feels like it was not long ago.
Yeah, and in real time, it was years ago.
Yeah, multiple moves for each of us ago.
But yeah, so part of Rufus's backstory was that he went off to the Fae as a young man, and if you don't know much about the Fae, regular mortals are quite often like really befuddled by being there. So, and time acts differently as well. So you can go in, be there for what you feel is like a month or a week or something, and when you come back out, it's actually been 5 years in the what's the normal plane called? Like the material plane? I can't remember. In the normal world.
That's a really good question.
So sorry, you're talking about in D&D,
the mundane world,
land.
or yeah.
Material plane. Material plane.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it was
material girl. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also don't really remember anything. So Rufus came out with a child and took it back to his. Oops, I don't know how that happened. And took her back to and raised her as his daughter. And once we started playing the campaign, that was part of my backstory that came up. And Tashi, as a DM, started to get her involved and brought her into the situation. And as a naive player, I was like, yes, I'm going to keep my daughter with me all the time, and she's going to come on the quest with us.
Yeah.
Which was a terrible idea now.
I don't think we ever assigned Sparrow to a person either, did we? I mean, Emily was playing as Nim for a while, I think, but I think Sparrow was always just a character or an NPC.
Yeah, pretty much. Like Tashi, the DM, was really controlling her. Just before the event happened, and we kind of, Tashi and I were discussing it a little bit, and we knew that she was going to be around. That's when we were like, oh yeah, we're going to actually have to start delving into her character, make her a character sheet. We can't just wing it with her all the time.
Plot armor, yeah.
Which is like one of those situations where, you just start to, that's a thing where you start to really get invested in a character.
How long was she in the campaign real time for us as players before the fateful event happened?
I don't know. I think it's such a long time ago. I want to say like a few months, maybe. We were playing once a week, so I don't know, maybe 2-3 months.
I think
that makes
potentially. I think it may have been longer because I don't want to spend too long on it because I want to talk about the actual thing that happened itself. But we traveled to, I think Tashi might speak in the chat if so Tashi's here. Oh, hey Chris, how you doing, man? He's going to be dipping in and out, he says.
Get your Tinder in the chat.
Get your Tinder in the chat. Whoa. Whoa.
Oh yeah. So I think it may have been quite a few more months. But my kind of point is that I think not just Rufus, but the other characters bonded with Sparrow as a character as well quite a lot. So the fact that she died was quite impactful to our campaign. And I'm quite interested if we can sort of remember how we dealt with it at the time. I've got a few memories, but Josh, I'd like to sort of get your insight from it, looking back on it. And I think we dealt with it well. I think we were able to express the emotions that our characters and us as players were feeling effectively at the time.
In the moment, it had a because like it occurred, in a subterranean area and everything, and then we kind of emerged from that. It really felt reminiscent of the Fly You Fools bit, where they're all convinced Gandalf's dead, and there's sad Enya playing, and we're all just outside the cave on our knees, like, oh God, she's dead. And it was like it hit us. It wasn't just like, oh, she's dead. Man, and we felt it. It was real.
For sure. I think it was one of the first situations where, as players and for our characters, that we came up against something that we weren't able to deal with.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing for a party to experience and for the DM to do. It's like a hard lesson, really. Like, no matter what level you are, there's going to be something you can't deal with. But I think there's an easy trap to fall into. Easy trap to fall into for a party, just to be like, to walk along and be like, we can do anything. Like, it doesn't matter.
Really hot in France.
It was quite a humbling experience in that regard.
I'm interested, Aidan, from I'm not, our listeners probably won't know, but you have a English literature or language degree, I believe.
Wait,
yeah.
and you're
yes, I do. Hey,
and you're very well read. You've read, you read a lot. You're always telling me about books. But from a sort of narrative is quite important in our campaign, and like when an event like this happens, are there things like that you can sort of give advice on how you would sort of deal with this to sort of like express that so it doesn't seem, do you know what I'm trying to say? So it's sort of it's not,
I think I know what you mean,
pushed to the side, and it's actually you use that as an effective piece of storytelling almost. And it's quite a tricky balancing act again, I think, because on one hand you had this occur, which did, to be hyper meta cynical about the whole thing, in many ways it was quite a motivating event. It did give all of us, particularly Rufus, Josh's character, it gave them a purpose. It gave them something to aim towards, which to this day we are still marching towards, of there might be a way to get Spera back. However, you kind of have to be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? On some degree sensitive in this kind of thing, because you're killing off a character who's not just comic relief. It's not just some goblin who you quite laugh watching them getting ripped apart by dogs. This is someone that you had emotional moments with. Like my character at the time, Kofin, who I may go into at some point, was like almost like taking on a kind of mentor, kind of like I was teaching her some magic and that kind of thing. And she was like a pupil in some respect. So I had these ideas as to, Spera can like learn these things, and then she's gone. And so on one hand, you have it as a motivating action, but you also have to be, I think, a little careful not to what they refer to in like comic books as refrigerator. You're not killing off this character just so you've got something to do. It's like, they're dead, we must avenge them. It's like, no, it's a bit more serious than that. Like, we had a loss. We have to grieve this. We have to actually go through the fairly complex human emotion of letting go of someone that you actually cared about, even if they weren't really real. You were invested enough in the campaign that this was a genuine loss. It was a stab. It was something you couldn't just magic back. Well, I mean, down the road maybe, but in the moment, it was a serious thing. And I think that we dealt with it quite maturely. You have to kind of, I think in D&D, like we sort of touched on it earlier, there's a tendency to be like, because you're doing these, even at a lower level, you're doing these amazing actions. So there's a tendency to sort of be, I'm all powerful, and therefore there's always a get out. I can always potentially bring someone back. So then you're pushing your game master, your dungeon master, to kind of come up with a way that you can bring a character back or get out of a situation that you can't. Like Josh, you touched on meeting a monster that you can't, or an enemy that you can't potentially beat. And I think, sometimes you've got to be humbled as a character and be like, okay, we're going to grieve, like in this situation, we're going to grieve for this character, but we're going to leave it at that point because there's nothing we can do. And it's actually just a great bit of storytelling almost, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like that hard lesson can really help develop the story in a really big way.
Yeah. And definitely as players.
I think it has, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I think it was clever as well, the situation. So we went to fight, we basically went too deep into the mountain.
We delved too greedily, yeah.
And we warned as well. Like I remember Tashi saying, like, if you go too deep, there's things down there.
Yeah.
And we were just like, nah, let's just go. But it was a situation that we couldn't like get out of as well. Like other times where like characters or NPCs have died, it's been like in a situation where you're not in immediate threat, or you can deal with it, and then you can then like take that person out of the situation and like sort of like deal with it. And that's, because we were super low level, we couldn't do anything about it. So there was no way of going back and like, trying to take her out of the situation or like.
No. And it didn't feel like it wasn't a planned plot point. Like there wasn't some notebook that said, and Spera dies here. There was like, we fucked up. We went somewhere we weren't supposed to go, ignoring warnings, and then there was something we weren't prepared for. at the level we were, I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about exactly what it was that happened, but even if we had fought back, that would have been, total party kill. There was just no goddamn way we were prepared for what we faced.
I'd like to move on because actually, within probably sessions, we had a player character death. For the first, this was, I'm alluding to Aiden's old character. He managed to survive this first death.
About.
Yeah, but I would like to sort of go into the details a little bit on what happened in the situation. I think Josh would be the best person to sort of elaborate on it. You'd have to go into super detail, but I think we've been talking about it, so it'd be interesting just to say exactly what happens.
So in a nutshell, we were trying to make our way into a dwarven city, making our way through a subterranean realm. There was loads of different ways to go, and we were warned not to go too deep. And we kept taking the route that kept going down. I could sort of feel.
We never quite reached Underdark, did we? We were just caving it.
No, for sure. Yeah. In retrospect, I had this feeling like Tashi was noting every time we chose to go down, and he had a certain amount of times where he was like, if they go down 5 times, then they're gonna meet this thing. But yeah, we walked down, found like a vault, if I remember correctly, of like treasure. And then
should have warned us. Yeah.
And then like we went like straight up to it, and we were like, "Oh, gold!" Like, yeah, great.
Yeah.
And then from the gold emerged an adult blue dragon. I want to say
definitely a blue dragon.
And
lightning is all I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lightning.
We chatted to it briefly. Immediately realized that we were in the wrong place, and then it immediately attacked us. And straight away did a lightning breath attack, like a legendary attack. And because we're so low level and hardly any HP, it eviscerated Spera. I remember Tashi describing it like it hit her. There was a blinding light in it, and she was just dust. There was nothing left.
She was dust. Yeah.
It did over her max hit points.
Like doubled
into the negative, which for if anyone doesn't know, that means you instant die. So normally if you go down, you get 3 death saves. So at the top of each of your turns, sequentially you then get to roll a d20. If you roll above a 10, you pass the death save. If you roll below a 10, you fail it. And then if you pass it 3 death saves, you go to 1 hit point. If you fail 3 death saves, you die outright. But if the aforementioned situation happens, you die. You don't get any of those death saves.
No. And then I think we just were like in shock. Yeah, that was the first time we'd experienced that. Like pure.
I mean, the situation was handled quite well because the challenge at that point was not fighting or defending. It was running. It was trying to get through a narrow passage that it was like slamming its head into, trying to chase us. And I thought it was quite good because Josh, your character, you basically kind of became maddened, and so part of the challenge was trying to prevent you from fighting it. We were trying to sort of push you up the passage while we were running away. So like the drama really came into it, and like you were like a grieving father in that moment, and it was beautiful.
I knew that it was a terrible thing to do, obviously, but I was trying to think like, what would you do? What would the character do? And I was like, they would just be enraged and like just be like, I'm gonna kill it. And if I think it was Mike. It was Dutch that managed to like grab hold of Rufus and restrain him. And if that hadn't have happened,
what he does.
which is perfect. If he hadn't have done that, I think it could have ended in a TPK.
That's a really good point, actually, because that's the subject that we're discussing: how you deal with character or player character death. And in a situation like this, what Rufus did, what Josh playing Rufus did, was exactly the right thing in terms of the storytelling and the role play. He did what Rufus would do. Like, he saw red and wanted to fight this dragon, even if he wasn't going to be successful, because his daughter had just been slain by it.
Yeah.
You're
not going to be logical in that moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. But you don't, there is a tendency with maybe other players, like they might want to think like, well, I'm just playing this for the combat element or whatever. So I know that that's a stupid thing to do, so I'm going to run away and preserve myself on that. But we play quite a role play heavy game. So what you did, the way Rufus dealt with that in that death in that moment was the right decision for Rufus.
Yeah, and that's for anyone that's listening who doesn't know the term, that would be playing the meta, is when you make a decision based on
metagaming,
outside of the game. Like, it might be a bad decision, so you just technically, so you don't do it. But
which everyone's a bit guilty of. Like, you might think, I might, try and shoot it with an arrow, but you might quickly check what the distance is. Even if in the moment you wouldn't be super sure. Like, we're all guilty of it to a certain extent.
That's part of the point of being a powerful character, is the power of foresight a little bit, I think, because I would say my character is a lot more intelligent than like me as Theo, or whatever. Like he's got a specific set of skills that makes him more intuitive in certain situations. So you can get around that sort of metagaming element, but there's a point where it doesn't. If we choose to live stream now, and if there's a viewer and they're like, oh wait, that person's just made that decision because it's the correct thing to do mechanically, it breaks
the immersion immediately. And the investment you have in a story, you're like, oh well, it's not real, it's not like it's just fake, they just want to survive.
And perhaps that kind of neatly moves us on to Aiden's experience with player character death. Yeah, I mentioned previously, within sessions, we had a player character death. So I don't know if you just want to sort of go into the character that you were playing before Richter a little bit.
Absolutely.
Give it some context.
So when we originally, long time back, when we were originally getting around the table for Pathfinder, I was playing a completely different character. Although that character didn't actually go through a death, we actually did the rare thing of neatly wrapping up the campaign. And so there was an epilogue, and they went on to do this, which has, colored the story that we're playing, because there's a suggestion that there is an overlap of what we're doing. But when we started playing this 5e campaign I was originally playing a drow wizard named Kofin. He was a necromancer, and yes, Kofin was a pun on coffin, because I thought that would be cute. And I had all of these ideas for Kofin. I spent ages working on his backstory. I wrote a voluminous diary of who he was. His whole thing was he came from Menzo Baranzan. He was a bizarrely good drow, and he was a bit weird because he was an abolitionist. The drows used slaves, but Kofin had this weird idea that we could replace slavery with necro labor. We could just use corpses, and it got him exiled. And so he wanted to take these radical ideas up to the surface. And I had all of these ideas about what he was going to do, and about how he would maybe one day return to the Underdark, maybe with a legion of necro comrades, and maybe bring down the slave society structure. But it didn't really work out that way. Ultimately, during the Blood Moon event, which I don't believe we recorded that, but during what was effectively the season finale, Kofin was kind of grievously wounded, mostly because I had never actually. Go on, sorry.
I'm going to stop you there quickly, because we had Kofin died previously before this.
Oh, he did. Yes. No, he did. No, yeah. Kofin originally died in, I believe, the very dwarven city that we were heading towards. And in that situation, the DM made a choice to intervene. So my character did go down. He did die. It was sad, but the DM decided that Dylan's father, who was an extraordinarily powerful figure, would intervene and resurrect Kofin. So it was kind of a freebie that one time, but it was very scary. It was like, you died. This won't happen again.
It sort of worked narratively at the point, because there was this whole meeting my character's father, his sort of estranged father, in this place. And basically, Kofin, we were fighting in a arena battle, weren't we, at this point? And Kofin was fighting on his own at this point with Dylan's half-brother. You were fighting
a mind flayer.
A mind flayer. Yeah. Yeah. And they did the classic thing where they suck the brains out of Kofin.
An ignoble death, if there was ever one.
But Dylan's father asked Dylan, does he want him to bring his friends back after death? So and he obviously chose yes at that point. And so it worked narratively at that point because he was there. He was witnessing this thing, and he had the power to do so. And I think Dylan sort of used the persuasive tactic of like, you were an absent father to me. Like, if you have any love for me, you'll do this act of kindness.
This is all those missed child support payments.
Exactly,
right now.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it sort of works, but unfortunately, as you were going on to say, like, we had it wasn't Kofin's last final rush with death.
The Death Wizard ended up finally embracing death in what I felt was, I turned tragedy into opportunity. To sort of like to expedite a little bit, because I got a little bit to say on this. But basically, during a final battle, it became very clear Kofin was isolated against the big bad. He was not going to survive this. They were not going to make it to him in time. So Kofin made the conscious decision to grasp a hold of the bad guy and cast Fireball on himself, effectively suicide bombing, just destroying himself completely and grievously wounding the big bad just in time for the rest of the party to get there and really start doing some damage. Yeah. And on that, I don't know if you mind me just sort of like spieling a little bit.
I really want to give you
some thoughts on this.
I really want to give you the floor at this point, because like it's a deeply it's an emotional thing, I think, to lose this character that you've been piloting for however long.
Yeah, so to make a decision in that moment, to be like, I accept this, and I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna do what I can still to like.
I'm not gonna run from this. I'm gonna embrace it. And what I would say is, it's normal to feel a little bummed about character death. Chances are it happened way before you were ready for it, and you may have had all kinds of ideas about what your character's arc was going. And when it just stops suddenly, it can be dispiriting. I think this is the other side of the tabletop as therapy idea, which I do subscribe to an extent. I like RP. I like that for a few hours a week. I'm not me. I'm Richter, Kofin, Aguirre, entirely different people with hopes and dreams that aren't my own. I think, Reggie Wu, who was only around briefly until he did come back, and that was another instance of me experiencing player death, but that was kind of funny. But I think
the record. That's what
I think there are three main things to keep in mind about this. One, if you're going through player death, the DM hasn't slighted you by not preventing your character's death. Sure, occasionally the DM might fudge some rolls here and there to give you a fighting chance, but ultimately the DM didn't craft this experience to enable your roleplay power fantasy. The dealer at the blackjack table doesn't owe you a 3 when you hit on 18. You took the gamble, now the cards got to fall where they are supposed to. Secondly, though this isn't the healthiest approach, death in D&D is not the big black unknowable full stop that is in our waking world. There are spells and rituals that can draw someone back. It might even become like a side quest, like, but were you to retrieve the lost file of Barunziaga, the Deathless, from the beating heart of Black Mount Kurazum, what's lost may be regained. But you shouldn't really expect your party to always put the overarch on hold just to get your worthless ass back. Third, grow up. Your character is inherently disposable. Death is an opportunity to start anew, to try a whole new different playstyle. None of my characters have been the same. I started out as a rogue, like a pure rogue. I went on to a pure wizard, and now I'm playing as a paladin warlock multiclass. And I'm glad that these deaths happened. As sad as they were at the time, I would probably be kind of bored if I was still just the same wizard I has always been. I've had the chance to experience so many different facets of a character. So I think that you've just got to be a little bit grown up and just accept that, okay, that happened. I'm going to be bummed for the evening, but tomorrow I'm going to get to work on a brand new, awesome character that I cannot wait to play as.
That's really interesting you finished on that last point, because although I haven't technically actually experienced a real character death from like with my personal character, the same session where Kofin died, me and Tashi, our DM, had planned in a written in.
You didn't tell us about this.
Yeah, and this was a secret death of my character.
Really? I've never known
Did you not
this.
know?
No.
So it didn't actually happen. It wasn't an actual death, because that would be I think dishonest for it to be like a get out of jail free card. It's like, oh, don't worry, you can come back as a werewolf. Spoiler, that's what happened to Dylan. But the reason I wanted to do it is because I wanted to develop the character further and bring in a whole new backstory to it, because like you were mentioning there, like, you know, you get this opportunity to bring a freshness to the character. And like you know, like although it is, you know, terrible for a character to actually die, you know, it is not, when you're playing a campaign that goes on for potentially years, it's nice to bring in that freshness. And so we use this planned death as a way for my character to come back as a lycanthrope.
It was a transformative experience for you.
And I could multi-class into Blood Hunter, and then I had this whole thing of like, oh, I need to learn to control the lycanthropy, and that was me leveling up through the Blood Hunter class. So so we sort of used it in that way. And I'm conscious, Josh.
Sorry, please.
No, sorry, no, it's fine. Aidan, do you want to say what you're going to say?
No, really, Josh, it was a tangent. I want you to go on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Josh, have you got any thoughts on any of this before we move on to something different?
No.
I did. I did have a thought that relates to Josh. I did have a thought that relates to Josh, and that is the rare experience of a treasured character death being a comedic event. What I'm thinking about, of course, is the time of that Julie was devoured by scarab beetles in Josh's cottage.
You mean Quizlam's cottage?
Quizlam.
Was it Quizlam's cottage?
Yeah.
He was the one that summoned it.
This is a throwback. This is a very old campaign.
Because Croissant had the whole relationship. Yeah, okay.
But I mean, this might be a good point to talk about Ruth's experience directly with player character death. Josh, you with your character, because Rufus has actually popped his clogs once, but we were at a point where we had the power level to bring him back. But it wasn't exactly, it wasn't a clean resurrection, so to speak. Like, I mean, obviously we love what Rufus is now, but he didn't come back in the exact same way that he was previously.
No, I guess, for Rufus, he's like experienced both sides of the power level of resurrection. Like at the beginning, when Spera, the NPC, died, we were super low level and couldn't do anything about it. And then later on, Rufus died to another encounter with a dragon, and that's become a thing in Rufus's knives as well now. He like hates dragons, and like whenever he sees them, he needs to slay them and prove himself. But yeah, that was when that happened. That was like the cusp of when we had really started to become like powerful characters. I want to say that's like the first time that we had brought someone back and carried them on.
We had, I think so, because yeah.
So it was Zook, wasn't it, who brought you back?
Yeah, and then from that point, I think we started to like, invest in 1,000 gold diamonds and stuff like that.
We always just keep a few on hand these days.
Yeah, and it was super situational. Like it was very similar. It felt a little bit like a freebie as well. It was similar to the Kofin's first death, but like it worked so well narratively. So yeah, we were fighting in High Canopy. It's like the center of druidic magic in the world that we're playing in. And Rufus died to a vicious attack from a dragon. He like went, straight towards it and tried to goad it into attacking him to try and distract it from the others. And I guess it paid off in one way, but not not well for himself. And then like narratively, this like center of life magic basically allowed Zook, Rupert's character Zook, to channel his druidic magic and cast Reincarnate. Is that the right one? Reincarnate.
So he didn't actually have access to Reincarnate at this point as a spell?
No, but Tashi, the DM, allowed him to do it. He basically hinted that his connection with the tree and his being gave him access to it.
it worked quite well because it was transformative for two different characters. Like, Rufus went from being well, I mean, maybe you'll say, but Rufus's whole character race changed, and also Zook was in. We were like, because sometimes when we play like story arcs and chapters, they're often kind of character specific. So like Richter had a whole bunch of time in the Varam arc where like it was a lot of the time it was about him and his people, and this was in many ways it was kind of Zook's story in some ways, and he was just going at that point through the process of becoming one of the 4 high druids of the world, basically. So it was kind of almost like it was like Dragon Ball Z. It's like when Gohan goes Super Saiyan 2 and it's like, whoa, here's what he can do. It was like, oh wow, here's stuff that Zook can do now. He can actually, whoa. And so it was like an evolution for both characters.
Yeah. I remember like it happening and being shocked, and it was really, I still remember it being really sweet, actually. Like it happened, and Tashi was like, yeah, you're dead. Like your character's dead. And like the room was just silent for like 10 minutes. Everyone was still carrying on the combat, but wasn't really saying anything. I remember being like, that's really nice. Like they actually cared about my character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like we mentioned way earlier on, like the death of a character or an NPC is, I think for us, and I think it's the way it should be, is just it's all about the story. And like 2 minutes after it happened, I was disappointed, but I was immediately like, this is actually, I'm kind of psyched about making a new character now, because we've been playing it for ages. But it was more important for Zook, wasn't it? Like it was the climax of his metamorphosis of this like chapter of the story that we're playing. It was like the moment that he became like the archdruid, basically.
Yeah. He was trying to bring back the Aeocene forest, and in the process, he brought back one of his best friends. It all sort of tied together really beautifully.
And it's worth noting as well that this is a dice game, and there's always a dice roll involved. So I think the way that Tashi always plays it is that he'll roll a d20. If it's your first death, if you get above, you have to roll a 5 or above for it to be successful. So he'd have done this with Kofin as well that first time that Kofin died.
Yeah.
So there is always that risk that you could roll a 1 to 4 and it's not successful. So even when you do have access to these high level spells and you've got the spell components as well, there's always that risk.
Yeah. Is this referring to what we changed to recently? Because I feel like we changed very recently to a new like resurrection system where it's a skill challenge.
So I think. I
mean,
so
Richter went
uses
for
a variation
that was a skill.
Uses a skill challenge, but then so Tashi's in the chat. Tashi, do you ever roll? Do you roll a dice at the end of the skill challenge to see if the skill challenge was successful as well, or do you just go off our rolls? Yes. To which one? He just goes off our rolls. Oh, okay. So yeah, that's so what Tashi's saying in the chat is that we do a skill challenge, and the more successes on the skill challenges makes the DC for the role that the DM makes. And this is a variation on of what Critical Roles Matt Mercer does. So a well-known DM. And I think I did something like this for my version of skill challenges when I've done some one shots as well.
So in the past it was like that, but we didn't help with the DC before.
I think there's 2 spells. So you've got Revivify, which I think is the instantaneous one, which you don't have to roll force, but you have to do that within a certain time period.
Yeah, it's probably
so
a
you've
couple
got a time,
minutes or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 1 minute. It's getting verified in the chat.
Fact checking.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got 1 minute to do that, but otherwise it's a resurrection, and you've got to do a skill, and we do it as a skill challenge. So that works quite well. Josh, should we go back to, because I think we've left it like, obviously I think people that are watching the campaign now, they know what your race is, but maybe you just want to sort of clarify what your race was before and exactly what happened in that situation.
Yeah, I was just a regular human dude before, and after resurrection, it was crazy. Like, it was so, I love how it happened. It was so thematic and perfect. So I was just a regular human, and then this event happened. You know, Rufus died to a dragon attack, and then the magics of the Aeocene allowed Zook to cast reincarnate. And the way it works is you succeed with the spell, and then you roll a percentage dice out of 100. And every single race in the game is, designated to. It's like each race is designated to like 2 or 3 numbers.
Is it just the core races, or is it? I think it's just the core races, so it's not like. It's still it's still a random roll.
Definitely, I remember rolling a 44, and Tashi like looking down at the list and being like, "Are you fucking serious?" And then be like, "Okay."
Not something you like to hear a DM say, yeah.
And then like he freestyled the explanation of like what happened, and then he was like, okay. And then from beneath the armor of Rufus emerges a small green hand, and I'd come back as a forest gnome, which is like, I think it's like maybe like 40 to 45 on the percentage is that race, and it was just amazing. It was so perfect because
like you roll that,
It was just great because Rupert's character Zook is also a forest gnome. So it was just perfect. Like, it was just like it was meant to be.
What a wonderful moment.
It would have been funny.
Had this episode. No, I was just going to say, this episode is a podcast. So if you want to go back and listen to it, I strongly recommend that you do. Yeah.
Very dramatic.
It's a very wonderful moment. I went back and listened to it because I unfortunately wasn't there for that session, and missing that session is something that I will always regret, but that's life. I'm sorry, Aidan, what were you going to say, man?
No, what was I? Yeah, I was going to say, because it was so like, down to chance, it was really funny that like you came back as the same race as Zook and a forest gnome within what was effectively like the grand temple of the forest. It works really thematically, but it could have gone differently. You could have come back as a dragonborn and had to deal with your dragon racism as a dragon. Like
there's loads of things like that.
For sure. And like, I remember feeling at the time, I've up until that point, Rufus was just a fighter, and fighters are like the most standard role you can do, I think. And I chose that at the beginning because all of my characters in the past were super like not serious, and I wanted to do something that was useful. Like croissant. And at that point, I was starting to get a bit like, I'm getting a bit bored of just being a fighter. Like, there's not a lot to do. And it was just another way that player death can really help move the story along and really help like enrich a character. So it gave me like so much more stuff to think about, because in their mind they were still a human, but now they're a gnome, and having to get used to all of that and try and like react accordingly when you're role playing and stuff is a really nice challenge to throw in there when you've been playing the same character for a while.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful session, I think, and like I listened back to it obviously, but I think that's just some of the beauties that comes out of D&D. And like, like you could have just died or whatever, and again that would have been thematic as anyway, like you died to a dragon like your daughter. That I think you can always derive some sort of like interesting thing from the situations and the things that happen.
I was just thinking, like, I mean, we probably recall it was only in recent sessions that I got to go through another situation of almost burning my character sheet when Richter died at the hands of some demons. You know, I had a really good time writing, you know, my tragic soliloquy for the opening of that episode, where it was like my death speech, and I'm dying, and you know, then went through a few sessions playing as my sister. And that was cool. Like for a while, I thought, oh, new character. You know, I was playing as like a pure paladin, very different kind of aesthetic, very different sort of mindset. But we came to the decision to bring back Richter, but of course, in a similar respect, it was not as a human, which he had been before, and that is why Richter is now a Githyanki.
Yeah, maybe we want to go. Should we talk about that? That's cool as well. Because obviously, I think Tashi gave us more of an opportunity to be able to bring Richter back.
Yeah,
and I think
really
he was
integral. Yeah.
Well, I mean, with regards to Silas, there's a lot of backstory here with Richter that we can talk about. Maybe a little bit of context might be good with regards to your Warlock pact and stuff like that. Just so we.
So yeah, I mean, my character, when I came up with it, I was interested in playing as, you know, I had just, Kofin was dead. I was interested in playing as a, you know, magic character again, because I'm not really all that into like just hit it with the sword, but I was kind of sick of always just wearing robes and going down immediately. So I had the idea of multi-classing as a few levels of Paladin and then the rest as Warlock, because I basically wanted to be a big armored dude shooting big old green beams from his hands. I thought that's cool, that's fun. And I had a good time coming up with the character, because I decided, okay, when I said this to Tashi, I think I remember this right. Tashi was like, okay, how are you gonna, you know, justify this? Like, how are we gonna make this work? Why is there a Paladin Warlock? Why would a Paladin have a pact with another entity? That's weird. So we kind of did it as an alien experience. Like, Richter was riding through the woods. He like doesn't fully remember what happened, but there was like bright light, strange like beings and figures, a presence. He woke up feeling different and changed, and suddenly was like channeling a power he didn't fully understand, and was now linked magically to this strange place within the ethereal realm called the library. And like he had, so I was kind of like in a tug of war between two different motivations. I've got the paladin side of me that's like a paladin of redemption who will, you know, fight injustice and save the innocent, but also there's this kind of this festering hunger for knowledge that my patron, the seeker, has endowed me with. And it's like, he's occasionally, there were times when he was like put in a moral situation of, well, are you gonna like fight for good, or are you gonna delve into secrets? And like, you know, whichever one you choose, one side of you will suffer. And so it was fun to sort of make a character who was conflicted in that respect.
So so Richter has these out of body experiences, usually during whilst streaming, long rests, where you're transported to this other realm essentially.
Yes.
Do you want to go into that, because that's quite key in you know, Richter's death and then eventually him being reincarnated? Yeah.
It's not to like, you know, be reductive, but I remember thinking at the time there was something a little bit similar to like a little bit similar to the Dragonborn DLC for Skyrim, where, you know, where you go to like that different realm of Hermaeus Mora, where it's that vast kind of archive of knowledge with the huge piles of books. It wasn't like that aesthetically at all, but instead Richter, when he slept during long rests, not every time, but sometimes, he would wake in a very like by the motions dream sequence, where it was the same every time but with slight variations, where he would awaken this kind of white void and there was this huge, like imperceivably massive structure, like in a kind of like gothic white stylings, and it was this huge library with vast columns of books stretching as far as you could possibly see. There's very real sense that this might be some unknowable repository of knowledge, and who built this, who runs this, why is there just a huge like castle library floating in the middle of a white void of nothing? And while there, Richter encountered a few different like beings and creatures. He met a bizarrely gregarious beholder named Nolx, who wore a dainty top hat on top of one of his eye stalks, and Nolx was strangely charismatic and friendly, which is not what a beholder is supposed to be like. But Nolx seemed like he was researching something here, and that perhaps he could use Richter in some respect. But Nolx also had an assistant named Silas, who was a woman who we described as looking different, not from here. I think I've never fully asked, but I think what we were sort of getting at was that Silas might be kind of like maybe Asian, but we don't know what Asia is. Like we just exist in this shard of
It's
the
just
world.
a different continent,
Yes.
isn't it?
It's a different continent, and like her clothing was different.
And
like
she speaks
had
a different version of common.
Yes, like it is common, but it's different, and it's not anything we've heard before. And she had a lantern that was like built in a certain style that just didn't look like a lantern that we had seen before. And so Richter had a sort of a separate relationship with these people, where he was trying to help them like find information. Like sometimes Richter would, because as part of my Seeker patron, Warlock stylings, I took the Pact of the Tome because I thought it would be cool to like have this like spell book that gave me access to more spells. But we worked it into the story where like Richter would like draw interesting things that he had never seen before, or like write down things. And occasionally he would have dreams where the library would basically ask him for new knowledge, and he would like put his tome into the library, and presumably the library would take the knowledge, and from that something was progressing. Like Richter was pleasing the Seeker, and in many ways, like Nolks was almost annoyed about that, because he was like, "Oh, why is Richter doing so well at this when I've been studying it for years?" And it was like moving on that way. And then eventually, of course, when Richter's death did occur, well, no, I mean, there's other things as well. I mean, at one point, Richter lost his powers completely. You might recall, and like I had to go for a whole like separate solo challenge with Tashi to try and get them back, and that was like just a solo adventure, Richter, Nox, and Silas in the ethereal realm fighting against Githyanki. And so
still feel bad about that.
The astral plane. Just so,
in the astral plane. Yes.
So the reason this is really important, and I suggest you go and listen to our first ever live stream where you meet this character Silas, right? Because what happens is Richter dies, and we have to flee the scene because we're on the back, we're on the back foot, we're losing, and we have to leave your body essentially.
Yes.
So a few sessions down the road, we're approached by this figure, and this is Silas. Although you can understand her whilst you're in the library in the Astral Sea because of the magic that's in place there, we can't understand her, but she still manages to persuade us to go there because she starts talking about Richter, etc.
She can say the name Richter, and
And what we're able to do when we're there is, so Nox is this powerful figure. He has he's put together, so I think it was a potion or a spell that allows us to
on the floor, and
And what's the spell? But it's astral projection. So we're able to astrally project into the Astral Sea, where the library is, and we're able to do this ritual. First of all, there's this battle use because these Githyanki who are interested in the library for whatever reason are besieging it. We're able to fight them back. And I can't remember, was it myself who has was it Dylan who had the book which had the soul transference spell?
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
So what had happened when Richter had died is because he had been linked to this place with the Seeker, his soul had gone back there, and it had also gone back with this artifact, the Rookstone Halberd, which is this powerful magical item that's in Richter's possession. So it travels with his soul essentially. But what we're able to do in this situation is we're able to transfer the soul, which is in this library, into the body of a Githyanki, and there's some other components, and we have to do a ritual to make it work. But essentially, that's how Richter comes back as a Githyanki.
Yeah, we basically had to work with whatever body we had on hand. It wasn't a case of like rolling for a random creature. It was kind of nasty, I remember. I mean, I was playing as Siegfried, Richter's sister at the time, who's a much more abrasive character than him. And then at one point, one of the things the spell requires was you need a body, you need a fresh corpse to put the soul in, which is not a very moral thing to do, but Siegfried isn't very moral. And at one point we had this Githyanki prisoner, and I believe we just held him down and just put our hands over his mouth and nose and just asphyxiated him.
Because we didn't want to damage the body too much. So
no, exactly. We didn't want to like stab it because I've got to go in that. So I remember as we were doing it, Theo, you said that's horrible. Like we just suffocated this poor guy.
So we don't want to repeat of the Loxodon in the one-shot situation.
Although although this was like given to us a lot more by Tashi, the skill to be able to do this, the skill challenge was a lot more difficult to succeed on. So because we had the scroll that we were able to do the spell, we had to, because Dylan, my character, has some arcane knowledge, and he's a spellcaster because he's an arcane trickster. He was able to attempt to cast this, to cast the arcane side of this spell. So I actually had to roll a dice, and I had a certain DC that I had to beat, but that was a lot higher than the standard roll that we would do for a normal resurrection spell. So there were, it wasn't just a sure thing at all.
No, we were jury rigging this resurrection together. Like, it was not certain to work. Like, I was almost ready to just be playing as Siegfried for the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's something I like a lot, actually, that when you do, progress in a campaign and with your character, you become a lot stronger. So there's, it's less likely for you to die, and you've got loads of ways of dealing with it. But at the end of the day, it's not inevitable that you'll make it.
No,
but there still is always that chance that you're going to fail the roll.
Even at level 20, it can all just go wrong.
I realize how much you rely on the other players in the game. Like, even like when you're playing a slippery rogue like myself, like, hard to hit, staying out of trouble. If I can still go down. So the other session I went down there, I got swarmed by a load of zombies, and I was reliant on another character to bring me back. Like, if I was on my own, like, it's not the part of this game is the fact that you are playing with a group of people.
Yeah, the lone wolf dies quickly in D&D. Yeah,
it's a cooperative game. Like, you've got to work together, and that's the beauty of it. I think we've always done a really good job of that, of like being aware of everyone's skills and not overlapping too much.
Absolutely,
nice.
Yeah.
Though sometimes you try and help and it doesn't work out. Mike still hasn't forgiven me for accidentally disenchanting his fire armor that one time.
I thought that would be a player-on-player death then.
Yeah, it felt like that must be like an actual over real life year ago, and I'm still hearing about that. So
I think it's been I think it's long.
He won't let you forget.
That was a long time ago. That must be like over 2 years ago, I think.
That was a long time.
Because COVID and everything.
So. Yeah, that was like when that was around the same session that Rufus found his lightsaber. Yeah.
Theo, you went through the same thing with your character though. Although I never knew that it was a deliberate thing.
It was deliberate, yeah.
But like, I guess you touched on what you got out of that. But is there anything else that you found out that you didn't know or didn't realize from killing off your character and starting again?
Found out about what specifically?
Just about the game and how it works and how you felt about your character after.
It's interesting because I think my motivation for doing that was to create more backstory and come to it almost with fresh eyes to a certain extent. I was able to write a whole section of backstory that we as players were able to then visit. So when Dylan came back after not dying as a lycanthrope, coming back as a lycanthrope, he'd lost all his memories. So he then was given this alias, Brother Draug. And Draug means wolf in Elvish. So that's why the people that found him gave him this adoptive name. So Draug, he's an elf, a half elf, so Brother Draug. And he was part of this group of individuals who were blood hunters. They were essentially monster hunters. And they came from this part of the world where Richter's from, so the Varamark. And I was able to write this whole sort of backstory. And so that was really great. But I'll tell you what I've noticed recently is that I'm really enjoying revisiting now Dylan's backstory. And I've really got that. I'm really enjoying the sort of the split personalities coming together. And I think a big motivation for him as a character is to join those split personalities back together again. And is that a possibility? And then I really think there's a character there with a lot of depth and there's a lot. I'm really enjoying being back in Xanthar City, where Dylan and Dutch are originally from. So I think it was a great opportunity with that, and I think in much the same way although Ruthus was Ruthus, when he died, he's now exploring what it is to be a gnome, and I think that it's kind of the reverse with Brother Draug, Dylan. He's remembering what it was like to be Dylan.
And your character no,
you please go.
Your character Theo and Mike's character are so intertwined as well. Like from the beginning, they are brothers, so they've got a lot of rich backstory. And this is just another way of like enriching it even more.
I think it's great for me as a player to separate it for a time, but now we've brought it back together in much the same way in the backstory when Dutch found out that they weren't actually brothers. Although it drove the characters apart initially, it's now brought them back together, like stronger.
I remember when you first arrived, when we started the new campaign, and I was like Richter, and like for the characters, for the characters that had survived, it was like here's what they've been up to. Like Dutch was like in a far more sort of like peaceful, almost monk-like meditation. Rufus was getting on with being mayor, and then this Theo comes back playing this character who we don't know him yet. He has an American accent now. It's different. And he strongly, I recall, resembled the villain from the previous campaign. Yeah. I really remember thinking, is that Frank Griffin? That's the villain from the previous campaign. And then the revelation that no, it's Dylan, but he doesn't remember that he's Dylan. That was fantastic. And that drove Dutch nuts, because he had buried you, he had grieved for you, and then we found your burial plot dug up, dug up ages ago. I was like, what the hell? What's going on? And that was awesome.
I love it because Mike didn't get it straight away.
That was great. Yeah. You got to watch it all come together. Yeah.
And there was a moment when he put two and two together that it was the same person, the same character. Yeah, it was very.
Yeah, like the very last thing we saw of Dutch in the previous campaign was he picked up your corpse and just walked off out of the city on his own, carrying you, presumably to bury you somewhere. So he had clearly gone through this whole "I've buried my brother" thing, and watching him have to reconcile, no, your brother's alive, but he doesn't remember you. Like, that was powerful.
Mike is such a great person to play with because he is so his character.
Yes.
When that happened, these were emotions that Mike and Dutch were feeling.
Yes, it was real. And
I felt so guilty because this was obviously a constructed thing. So I felt like a bit like the puppet master. Chris is saying he wished he could have seen that.
He's so invested.
Do you know what, Chris? I think we've got some badly recorded audio of that session. So potentially, if you're really keen, we can put that together for you.
But it's like, a lot of the time he doesn't say anything when he's in anguish. It's like the presence that he exudes. Yeah. He's like silent and just like seething.
He's somber. Yeah,
it's great to live stream because you can see that reaction on his face.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, we've been going for just over an hour now, so I don't know if anyone's got anything they want to say before we sort of call it a day.
I've just thought of a really slightly interesting topic, and we don't have to talk about it for very long.
Yeah, go for it, man. Yeah.
But relating to death of characters, I think there's been loads of times where we've stopped a death from happening in NPCs, and in loads of those situations, those NPCs have like grown and grown into like really relatable characters that keep coming back and like enriching the story as well, because we went to that effort to save them. So like Kunda, for example.
Yeah, I was thinking of Kunda.
Who's a dwarf that we saved from Thalbaral. He now came back with us and has like his own backstory and subplot that's running alongside.
He has a marvelous mechanical man in his company who we never would have met if he died.
He's been taken, hasn't it? He's been taken.
Well, he has. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is on live stream.
Yeah. And then there's Jin
we know that thingy is taking him, right? Actually, we shouldn't go down this. This is a whole other thing.
Yeah. But it just came to me like, I wonder if other players do that in other campaigns, and if you are playing in your own campaign and you don't do that kind of thing, I would really encourage it. You know, putting yourself out there, not just for the people you're playing with, but like the NPCs as well, because they can really, I don't know. There's been some amazing times actually with them.
Absolutely. I this wasn't a death, but and Rupert, like kudos to Rupert. He's so good at this sort of thing. Aaron, when he
Aaron.
He fixed his arm. He lost. So there's this NPC, and he was a hunter, and he like lost his arm, and then he just got this spell. He went over to his hut, and he grew him this new arm. And moments like that they are really wonderful, and it's definitely part of the reason why I absolutely love this game.
As soon as he got his arm, the first thing he did was just grab his bow and run off to the woods to go do what he's wanted to do for years, maybe. And there's just this real sense of, we're going to see him again. Like what we've done for this character is going to pay back in dividends. Like we've toppled the domino. We're not going to see all the dominoes rolling past the back of the screen, but eventually they're going to come back, and you're going to maybe see this again.
Yeah, it was and also we had the situation with I forgot his name, and it was definitely Dylan who was very much pushing for him to be Varian. So our friends Rolo came and played for us for a couple of sessions with his character. He's busy doing dad duties at the moment, but he was like, what's the name of the Tashi will probably be in the chat. I've got it on the notes somewhere. What is his name? Jin. So Jin died actually when we first started live streaming. He's just this NPC who's also a lycanthrope, and we had to. It was the whole episode with Oscar Silvermark. He came to Ingmiri and he'd set all these traps up, and he'd basically gotten Jin to transform, and he was attacking another NPC. So we had to put him down. And I was saying to Varian, Dylan was saying to Varian, like, you know, we've got to subdue him. Don't outright kill him, because like he's a friend. And Varian used a powerful spell, and Dylan was like absolutely so pissed, because he obviously relates to this character. He's another lycanthrope. He understands what he's been through with that, with regards to that side.
But Varian basically tossed him in a blender.
So like Dylan loses his shit at Varian, and then it sends him back to Ungmiri with some diamonds to go and you know, bring him back to life. So I mean, maybe I was a bit too forceful with that, but like it was like a character that Dylan very much related to, and he saw the relationships that this young NPC had within the village that we very much care about.
And like when Jin came back, I might be misremembering, but when Jin returned, he no longer bears the curse of lycanthropy. So like there's potential for Jin's entire character to just be completely different now, which, you know, it could have just been the case that, Jin was this young lycanthrope. He didn't have the same control over his bestial form that Brother Draug does. And there was like his tragic death. But, you know, due to player involvement, he's back as a different kind of guy who doesn't have to be afraid of full moons anymore. And I'm sure he does bear us a feeling of gratitude. So I imagine we're going to see Jin again. Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, I guess in a nutshell, like, what would you, for players out there, what would you say about character death?
Don't fear the Reaper, I guess is what I would say. Embrace it, and all the things that it brings to the game. It's part of the game, and it's part of one of the things that makes the game so great. And whether or not your character dies for real or not, like, you know, just take, like you were saying, Aidan, like, it's the opportunity. You get an opportunity from that to do something else. I mean, it's a Vala Morghulis situation. Your character is going to be slaying men by the dozens, maybe the hundreds. That sword's going to fall on you eventually. All men eventually die. And you know what? That doesn't mean the end of a story. Maybe it means a new chapter. Maybe it means a new story. But nothing ends. You know, I mean, everything ends, but nothing is lost. Things will continue in the future, maybe in brand new, exciting ways that you hadn't anticipated.
I think that's a great place to leave it, Aidan. That's a fantastic little
indeed
monologue. Well, thanks for everyone that's joined us and anyone that's watching back. thank you very much. If you are watching back, remember to subscribe, hit the like button, etc., etc. Check out the podcast. Check out the live stream. We stream every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Sounds great.
If we get enough
love it.
subscribes,
Yeah.
if we get
We need
enough if we get enough subscribes, we will do a Dungeons and Drag Queens game where we all drag up. We'll do it.
You heard it here first.
I'm making an executive decision on behalf of the Gypsies of Fortune.
Yeah.
You
We're
said
aiming
it
to get
now.
those
We're
50
going to have
subs
to do it.
we're aiming for those 50 subs. Yeah. So I think we're waiting for Tashi to end the stream because he's kindly put the stream on from his home machine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Hey.
Hey God, how you
Hello,
doing?
Hello.
Are you feeling merciful today?
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't listen to it all because I'm
That's
actually
fine.
playing D&D. But very good. I'll listen to it back. Interesting stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great.
Have you talked
Thanks,
about
that was
so much for joining
next
us.
week? Because I just asked Mr. James Gifford whether he can potentially join us for a session. Perhaps Mike and James, maybe me or you, Theo.
Yeah. What we need to for a different character? Is this what you're saying?
No, for the chat, for another chat.
Oh,
Perhaps
for another
on-
chat. Oh,
perhaps
of
on
course.
mechanics
Yeah.
or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah, we're thinking about more of like rules and homebrew with James. I think would be cool.
Yeah, a DM
That's
to
such a good-
DM discussion.
I'd
Yeah,
be really up
homebrew.
for being obviously part of that one.
Definitely. So, I mean, I'm keen to get Mike involved.
I think Mike would be good as well for the mechanics. We could do.
Yeah,
Could
I'm
take
definitely keen
He
to get
loves using
James
That's a
them.
boy
involved.
that
Advantage.
studies right there. He knows
Well-
the mechanics better than he should.
I'll tell you what. Why don't we'll talk about it, and I'll put a post out regarding it. But I think it's going to probably be more related to mechanics or something along those lines. So yeah, this will be Tuesday, 7 p.m. I'll put out a post. Yeah,
We'll
there.
find Mr. James Gifford's availabilities and we'll get back to you.
we'll definitely have Mr. James Gifford on at some point. That's a promise.
All right, I'm ready to stop the stream.
Yeah, that would
Alright.
be great, man.
See you
Cheers.
later,
Godspeed,
Chris.
thank you for
Ciao,
listening.
All right,
Chris.
bye.
Thank
And
you.
Bye-bye.
Martin.
Cheers, Martin.
Bye.